Well, welcome everyone. We're here for the PAB panel on freelancing, the good, bad, and the ugly. I will introduce everyone real quick, and then we'll get straight to the hard-nosed questions and find out a little bit if these guys know what they're talking about. But before we do that, let me introduce our panelists. They're all part of the professional advisory board that helps the department really have a kind of an outlook on what's going on in the profession. And they're a really fantastic network that not only extends the network of industrial design and interior architecture, but also really lends their expertise throughout the year to kind of really help the school and the department. So without further ado, I'll introduce Brian Graham. He's the founder and creative director of Graham Design LLC, and currently a mentor for some of our design thesis students. And he's coming from the San Francisco, the Bay Area. And we have Dan Hamilton, principal and lead designer of Sky Arrow Creative LLC. He is coming from Kansas City as an industrial designer and is currently, as you can see, a principal and freelancing himself. And we also have Katie Hoke, principal of Hoke Lay Architects. They are located in Lawrence, but they've also practiced in Seattle, Washington. And so Katie has a small practice along with her husband. So she's intimately involved in all of the things day to day. And we have Nicholas Ruiz, director of operations and design at Ohio Design, also from the Bay Area. So we have the West Coast and the Midwest really well bracketed. And so I will get this thing started, but I think we'll then turn it over to you all to ask your questions and take advantage of this time we have with these professionals. I guess it goes without saying that things have changed. The last year has been rather unprecedented, and we've gone through kind of what absorbed that, I suppose, and now we're hopefully heading on the other side of things. And I guess I would just like to ask, how are your businesses doing, and what do you see as the outlook as we hopefully are trending toward kind of reopening? And I'll throw it out. I'm looking right at Brian right now, so I'm just going to have you get us started, if you don't mind. And then we'll go through the round table, and then after that, it'll just be a question gets thrown and somebody just picks up the ball. All right. But this first one will just hit everybody. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for having me. Great to see everybody. I think things are evolving, as you say. I said this, I think, about 6 months ago. I think we're in this sort of constant prototypical stage about life for the next 12 to 18 months. It may actually shorten for some people in certain areas, just depending on how things evolve, obviously with the virus and such. My work really has continued to be the same work and the same type of work with the same level of interactions that I've had with most of my manufacturing partners. Because I'm based here in San Francisco and almost nobody that I work with is here, I'm at least a plane ride or two and a rental car drive away from my manufacturing partners. So the only thing that's really been affected for me is the actual visiting of the manufacturing partners and reviewing of prototypes. In the last year, I've had probably 2 or 3 different product lines that have been launched that I've actually physically never seen the product. We've just done it all virtually, and that's been pretty challenging.
Wow. Yeah. So those have already launched and they're on the shelves, as it were?
They're out in the real world, and people tell me that they're okay. I'd have to say, I hope. So it's been a little bit of a leap of faith there in that area. But because I work virtually, really, and have for such a long time, and I rely so much on my manufacturing partners to do the heavy lifting of prototyping and back and forth and the engineering, that partnership really has come into specific relief. Now it's really a true partnership, and both of us feel confident. So yeah, the product launches.
Dan, will you take next?
Yeah. Honestly, last year was only the second year that I've been freelancing, so I don't have a whole lot, or I didn't have a whole lot to really compare it to. But I will say that in spite of all the craziness and everything else, I ended up having a better year than the year before. The types of clients and the type of work I'm getting recently has kind of shifted a little bit, which is great. But I'm still getting a lot of the same work that I used to as well. So just continuing to work on just the growth of the business and the client base. 2021 started off a little slow, but it is just crazy for me right now. So hopefully that continues.
Fantastic. Katie.
Um, yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride. I think our biggest challenge has been juggling the home life with continuing to work professionally. So our kids, we're in Lawrence, and Lawrence shut the schools down to 100% virtual until last week. And so trying to juggle, running a business, keeping clients happy, and keeping our children educated, which we suddenly became responsible for, was insane. But now school has reopened, which is amazing because our kids went from like angry sloths to like normal people again. So I feel a huge sense of relief, and the business, through all of this has stayed really busy, which I'm really fortunate for. We just like doubled down and put everything into the business and continued, it's like, get up, work as much as you possibly can, stay responsive, stay engaged, stay connected. A lot of the building we had done, this is our 5th year, which for a small firm is pretty significant. If you kind of make it to year 5, and don't screw up too much, you can continue to thrive. So all the building we had done up to this point has really paid off, and we're seeing a really good year. In 2021, I think we already have 10 projects, good sized projects on the books. So we're booking out into, project start dates late summer, which is pretty great for a small firm.
And Nicholas.
I'll say that the business is slowed dramatically. Our main clientele is workplace. We design and make furniture for workplace, and so as you know, especially in the Bay Area, all that is not happening. So it was really slow through the fall, but we have had a pretty significant pickup since December, and even just before this call, took a fairly large deposit on a project, which was awesome. We've had, what I found is like a lot of our clients that we've had for 5 or 6 years are really the ones kind of supporting us through all of this, which I'm really thankful for. We had an uptick in a lot of our residential work, but that's hard to balance out against workplace. And then the change at home, since business has slowed, my focus has really been on my family and making sure that my little boy is engaged and we're having fun. So I dialed back quite a bit in the fall, and I found that I could do other things. So I do photography as well. So that picked up. A lot of my friends in the city who are architects are incredibly busy, and it's a great time to go and shoot. So I'm shooting a lot. And then I've also started up a kind of a new platform with some makers here in the city, which I won't get into, but there's been other opportunities that have come up. I'll say that you just keep grinding and you find a way to make it work. And I think that's probably something that we all have in common. We're kind of self-starters. We're all entrepreneurs in our own ways, and you just make it work, And so that's where I've been at.
One of the questions, and anybody can jump in if they have a question for the panel. But one of the questions that came up when I was talking about student leadership group was, how did you guys get started? I mean, how do you go into this kind of freelance business? I mean, you graduate as a designer and then, find yourself, grappling with, all the other end of all the tools that you maybe didn't learn in school.
Can I tag on to that
that?
question? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Reed.
I was just going to add one thing real quick to that question is like, on top of getting started, how about getting started right after grad school? I'll just add that, but you're up now, Nicholas.
I was just gonna say, for me personally, and I've known other people to kind of do this. I got my start when I was like 12 or 13 years old mowing lawns. It's like, I think when you have that in you where you're like, I'm gonna go do this myself, you realize that you can own your time, you can dictate, your income. That kind of starts at an early age. And it started for me. As I went through college, I was painting houses at a house painting company. And it was actually, I was excited to put that away and not have to worry about that and go work for a firm. But after working in architecture for about 10 years, I just went out and did it again. But you kind of have to build up that community. And there is a lot of support there. Even like for you coming out of grad school, I would say, put the word on the street, find the work that you want to be doing, and it will happen, maybe not overnight, but it will happen as long as you keep focused on the work that you want to be doing. I mean, that's what's happened to me, and that's the advice I give to everyone.
Hey, Dan, you might jump in here too. I mean, you just got your MBA not too long ago.
Yeah. So I actually started my freelancing kind of at the tail end of the MBA program that I was going through. I will say for me, I probably, Nicholas, you were in good shape by kind of realizing you could own your time at a much earlier age than I did. It took a lot of my working life, kind of working professionally and for, companies and really working for other people before it finally kind of occurred to me that, man, I can do my own thing. So back in March 2019, I parted ways with the company I was working for, and I made the decision just to go all in and do my own design business. And it's incredibly scary. It's not there's no guaranteed paycheck. There's no, assurances of anything other than you're left with the tools that you have and the whatever work you want to put into it. And even then, there's no guarantee. So I don't know that I would be where I am right now if I had tried doing it right out of school. I think I really needed to kind of grind through many, many years of working professionally with other organizations and kind of, and in doing that, I've done design work, but I've also worn a lot of the other hats like purchasing and estimating and scheduling and project management and sales. I've really kind of done it all, and that exposure and that experience really puts me in I think a pretty unique position right now as a freelancer or a studio owner. So it's not the same path for everyone. My path definitely required me to pay a lot of dues in the corporate world before I felt that I was in kind of the best place for me to be to start my own design business.
Yeah, can I build on that for a second, what Dan said? Because I think that echoes what I experienced. When I got out of school, like you always do, you think you know everything. Right? And then you realize about 6 months into working for somebody, you don't know anything. And once you hit that wall, you immediately start to go through a cycle of sort of consciously being incompetent and then gradually becoming more competent. And I think that's a really healthy thing to go through. Plus, I think design firms can be a finishing school in some respects because you get the academic side of things with your degree, and then you need some real world seasoning, right, and experience. And I think it's just really, really hard to get that on your own right out of school. Some people still do it. There's always those kind of success stories you hear about, but I think that they're more of the outlier than they are the norm.
Brian, I'd say something that I thought about, like out of school, I practiced for 10 years with Bowen Swinski Jackson, and I thought about it that exact way. This is my, if I'm going to make a mistake, it's going to be on their dime. Like I really want to like learn as much as I can. You're going to be able to make mistakes. They're still going to pay you, and you just keep going, right? I think that key difference is when you're on your own, you start to make mistakes, you're paying for it, and but you also
Right.
get
And you can have
rewarded.
a
It
and you can
happens.
have a lot of bad experiences then, right? That sort of taint your view of whether going out on your own was really the right choice. So yeah, I'm with I like the idea of Nicholas is talking about them. Learn on somebody else's nickel.
Yeah, and I think
For a little bit.
the thing we all forget is that this is a business first, right? So I didn't ever want to run my own business. It's funny, my husband really wanted his own firm, and I was like, I don't want the responsibility. I don't want to. But I was really good at it, and the experience I had in smaller firms, I basically was running a lot of the firm. So when we decided to branch out on our own, we had a unique experience where we had a lot of projects and we hired quickly, and we still have our core team with us, that guy included. But it's all almost 100% of what I do is all business. I mean, I do the books, I do the accounting, I email clients when the invoices are late. The first time I had to do that, it took me about 3 days to get the nerve to send the late invoice email. I was like sweating profusely. So you really have to run a business first. If you want to design and you want to do your own thing, you're probably better off at a firm. But if you want to run a business because you have certain values that are really important to you, you want to have employees and treat them a certain way and treat your clients a certain way, that's where I think I would say you're going to lean towards wanting to be a business owner. So we own a business, we offer marriage counseling, and we design.
I guess I have a question. So with running your own business comes taxes and legal responsibilities. So how, as a person who does it all on their own, do all of that on their own? Or do you outsource? I guess, what's that realistic?
Yeah, you hire an accountant and an attorney. Do not do your own taxes. There's some lessons you'll learn early on. Hopefully you find a mentor that can help guide you, because accountants they're not creative, so they're not going to really tell you how to structure things to make the most of it, but you'll figure it out quickly after one tax year.
Yeah, I would second that. Try not to do it on your own. Take as much advice as you can. I would say go to YouTube. There's tons of CPAs on YouTube that at least will give you some advice on how you should be either spending your money or being responsible about it for taxes. It's a really great resource.
Yeah, and I would say that that's one of those things when you're working for a firm, you're insulated from all that stuff to the great extent. If you're working for a smaller firm, you're probably more exposed to it, which is a good thing. I think sometimes a small firm could be a great place to sort of do your finishing. But even in a large firm, if you were interested, you could seek out and understand, like, okay, what happens with time cards and where do they put that stuff and why is that important? But a lot of it now is so much different than, let's say, when I started, because when I started, my unintentional nonprofit organization, which is my design studio, that it was, we didn't have Quicken or manage your own business online or any of these resources that you do now. So it's a lot easier to find out what's going on and the lay of the land. But bottom line, like the money you think you're going to make, you could just take half of that and put it aside, because that money is going to need to be supporting your taxes, going to support, depending on how much you make, right, what they typically would call burden of an employee. So you could be 35% of your taxes, depending on what state you live in, and you've got healthcare and a bunch of other things, and pretty soon you're going to realize, wow, that $125 an hour that I'm being paid is really only half of that. And that kind of helps you get a sense of, what it's like.
Yeah, and then half that again, because you've gone over your billing agreement.
Oh, right, because you misunderestimated, right, that, oh gosh, I thought it was going to take 40 hours, but it took 100 hours.
You got to make it pop. You got to make it
Yeah.
pop. You got to spend the time to make it pop.
That's right. And so there's the billing rate that you charge, and then there's the 75 cents an hour you actually earn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're being kind of facetious, but
but just a little.
The real world.
It is Monday morning. I mean,
Well,
it's
Yeah.
allowed, right?
Yeah.
I
Did Nathan
think for
want
me-
up with people?
No, we named it correctly, right? Good, bad, and the ugly. I mean, come on. We all know that this is there is something that is to be said for defining exactly what you're going to do every day and be completely self-reliant. And then there's the other part, which is all the, all the everything that you have to cover to keep yourself thriving.
I think the way I look at it, if I could just jump in real quick, I don't want my clients thinking that they can do design work. I'm the professional, let me do it. On that same line, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer. So why am I trying to do that stuff? So just kind of recognize, the things that you can do and the things that you can't do. And just accept that, hey, there's just some things I need to get a professional to work on to help me with, and just be okay with that. You don't have to do it all yourself.
That's great advice. I think the architecture practice, right? Going through school, it kind of teaches you how you can basically do anything. If you can read through all that minutia and practice and design, but at the end of the day, like you said, get a professional.
Well, and that's getting to be so much easier now. That seems the flexibility that everyone's trying to kind of create their own niche in that. I mean, the accountants are doing the same thing the designers are doing. So I mean, there's a lot more. I feel like a lot more support system, kind of ready for kind of freelancing, small businesses, and all that than there was 20 years ago.
Yep.
I have another question if no one else wants to go.
Go for it, Chloe.
So you talked about values or why deciding to break off and do one thing. I guess what fueled that passion, or how'd you find those specific values or that niche, I guess, that really made you want to go that direction?
Okay. Can I take this one first? So Chloe, and this kind of goes back to the original question of how did you get your start, right? They're kind of interwoven. The firm I was working for suggested that I should leave, and I agreed. We don't technically, okay, don't spit out your coffee, Nathan, because that would be.
I should have been ready for that, actually, knowing you, Brian. So,
But it's true. It's true. I worked for a really big firm and things were going great, but there was a downturn in the economy, and they said, you know what? I think that you're going in a different direction than we're going, because I was really getting into this product thing. And I thought, hey, let's make that into a profit and loss center. And at the time they said, I don't think that's really what we want to do. Okay. So off I go. And almost everybody that I knew who had their own business said, jump in, the water's fine, right? And they also say, if you don't like it or you hate it, you can always go back to work for somebody else. What they don't tell you is 6 months after you're into it and you're doing well, you could never go back and work for somebody else. Or rarely. I mean, people do. I think they make much better employees, quite frankly, because then they understand the full ecosystem of business. But, sometimes it's just circumstance. Sometimes it's a conscious choice, and then sometimes it's just circumstance that forces you to make a choice. And then that's kind of sink or swim time. And I think we've all probably experienced that at some level, haven't we?
yeah, I was contemplating it for years because I built the interior architecture studio of our firm and the equestrian design studio, and it didn't exist. And we were small. There were 5 to 8 of us, but I was number 3 for a long time. And the owner had dangled partnership for a while, and I got really serious about it. He was like, I don't know. I mean, it's my work. And I was like, wait, whose work is this? This is your work? And that just made me really angry, that the years and years and the horrible nights that I had spent up, trying to deal with these clients that are so difficult. And we created these amazing projects. And I was like, so this is your work now? Like, this isn't the firm work? And that just set me off. And it made me mad. So My revenge was to go out on my own. No, but it was a strive of like, hey, I've worked so hard, and at the end of the day, the pretty pictures don't do it for me. Like that doesn't feed my ego. What makes me feel good is working with people I really enjoy working with, creating great projects, creating really strong relationships with people. And, I was like, I can do all this. I've already done it all. And I want to do it our way. I want to run a really good place. I want to be really good to our employees, really good to our clients, really good to the contractors. So that's what drove me kind of over the edge of just saying like, all right, I just have to do this. It's not easier. It's a lot of work. There are days I do wish that I could just get up and somebody would give me a list of things to do. But I would be super bored. I would be like nuts after, a couple months. So.
But Katie, that's the thing, right? It's you're working hard for somebody else, and you're like, you know what? If I'm going to work this hard, I should just do it for me or do it for us, right? The smaller group. But you're still working really hard, right? You didn't replace that, but
Yeah,
now you own it.
Right. And there's the good and bad of that. The highs are higher, right? Like when things go really well, it's really exciting. We get to share it with our team and our employees. And when it's bad, I'm up in the middle of the night, sleepless with anxiety because, a client's misbehaving. But you kind of have that anyway, I guess. It's just now it's like, well, there's a financial impact to it, but we've been able to grow beyond that as well. So we're insulated from those types of ups and downs.
I'll kind of add to that in that, when you're working for someone or with someone, I found that I was getting bored and the projects were lasting so long. Like I'd be working on one project for 2 or 3 years. And I was also interested in furniture and photography, and I wanted to do all those things together. And for me, I just found that the only way I was going to be able to do that is to do it on my own and to explore it on my own. And you start to build that, at least I did when I was working for someone. I had always had a side hustle or 3. I was always working on the weekends. I was up all night because like you're young, you can, right? And I did that. And leaving and being out on my own allowed me to just basically start to create whatever work I wanted to. And it also allowed me to create my own lifestyle outside of this kind of prescriptive, like you get up, you get some coffee, you go to work, you maybe take lunch really quick, and then you might work all night. And then you do the same thing for 7 days in a row, for 20 years. And it felt like I could get off of that cycle and reprioritize the things that I was interested in. Allowed me to travel, allowed me to do just a ton of things. So I'd say do it if you're young. I mean, you can. There's a lot less risk before 35 than after. I'll say that. You're going to have support. If you can make it through architecture school, you can do this. And there's going to be people that support you. If you're a good person, right? People will support you.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. So I'll throw in another one, another question. I guess, what do you guys do when things get lean, when there's a gap of work? I mean, one of the things that's difficult, obviously, with freelancing is that you're the marketing, you're the accountant, the marketer, the designer, the job captain, all the things. You're all the hats. So what happens when things are lean? I mean, how do you pivot?
Well, like for me, I in those slow times, there's always something I can do. There are plenty of things that I kind of put on the back burner when I've got, real live projects coming in. You mentioned marketing. There's always another connection I can make with a potential client. There's always outreach I can do with people that I've already connected with to just kind of follow up and continue to kind of nurture relationships that already exist. There's any number of, I can get caught up on my bookkeeping. There's just any number of things that I can do with my quote unquote downtime. That being said, when it is the slow time and there's just no active projects coming in, I usually shut down by 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because there's only so much of just kind of beating my head against the wall, trying to get work coming in that I can take before I just get, fried. And so kind of learning that balance of just like when it's time to just kind of walk away for the day and just go enjoy my life, make myself happy as a human being, and then I can start up again the next day. So downtime, yeah, there's always stuff you can do, but you have to always be thinking about what are those things that I can be doing to keep advancing my business and getting my name out there.
I would second all of that, especially on, do whatever is going to make you happy, whatever brings you joy, because you really can only control the things that you can control. If you're working hard and you're looking for work and it's just not happening, whether it's that week, that month, like you got to give yourself time to stay healthy and take care of yourself and your family. That comes before everything else. But I'll say also, it's this idea of kind of always being prepared, that you kind of always have as I like to use the word entrepreneur. Like you always have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, maybe a plan F, right? Having multiple like revenue streams, if you will. That way it's not so much about, are you going to pay the rent? It's more about like, am I going to get to that work that I really want to do? Or am I going to be forced to have to do all this stuff that I don't want to do? And if you can prepare yourself financially, whether it's marrying well, as we talked before this call, or just like making the right decisions, it all matters. Like, you have to kind of protect yourself in that way, because ultimately it's your life, it's your time. Don't try not to spend it on projects you don't care about,
Yeah, I think the goal is to not have really too much downtime, right? That would be ultimately the best thing, that you would like never get to Dan's, lists or to Nicholas's version F concept.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's important about that, and it's a skill that I learned right away, and I, shout out to my father, who was a business consultant and really kind of took me under his wing and helped me about this. You got to understand that there's a pipeline for work, and it's as simple as this. For every person that you come into contact with, that how many people do you have to talk to that are going to ultimately give you a chance to put a proposal in? And from that, how many of those proposals that you put in are you actually going to win? It's kind of like what they call a conversion rate. And so as I started to do the math of all of this, because I ultimately found out, okay, this is how much money I want to end up with. That's going to give me my lifestyle, pay the mortgage, so on and so forth. And you back up the pipeline to how many people to proposal, and how many people to ask me for a proposal, and how many people do I have to even be talking to or whatever. You realize that you're going to be selling almost all of the time. And selling is not a bad word. You can call it marketing or whatever. It's building relationship, it's networking, it's understanding what's going on. It's what we all do every day. But you constantly have to sort of be mining that. And when you get really busy, it's hard to do it. So there's ebbs and flows or lulls, as Nathan was talking about. But this idea of understanding that if I want to get to here, I've got to have this much stuff going on that's going to funnel to that through a pipeline, I think is key.
Yeah, also, when we moved to Lawrence, so we did a really dumb thing, which is work in Seattle for 15 years and then move to the middle of the country where we basically have very few connections and start a business. But we had work, we had clients, and we were working remotely. And so we knew we had 2 years of runway to start making connections here. But so when we moved here, one of the local architects who was really kind, really helpful to mentor us, which I so appreciate, he just said, you have to be comfortable not knowing where your next project is coming from. And so that I always go to that when it looks like we're going to have a lull, and I get through my lists, that Dan mentioned, and get through the marketing. I'm just like, you have to kind of have this optimism that it's going to be okay. And all the work you put in, because you're always working, you're always closing, you're hustling, you're marketing, you're, saying hi to people, even if you don't want to say hi to people. that all will pay off, but you just have to know like it's out there, you've done your work and it's going to come in, and you just have to like be comfortable with the unknown. And that's terrifying for a lot of people. Even my business partners are not comfortable with that. And that's kind of how I ended up more in the role of doing all this for the firm, not because I like it. I just am not as bothered. I'm bothered the least out of the three of us by it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Katie, is like, you know, it's almost like, I call it putting the word on the street. Like, as long as you're telling people what you're up to and what you want to be working on, it doesn't matter if it's your friends, your family, or whoever, like just any opportunity to meet a new person and get them excited about what you're doing. I mean, you'd be surprised how that keeps coming. But as soon as you find that like handful of people, that business can last like 20 years just from that handful of people.
Yeah. And the internet's so great now. I mean, my big thing is I just hand people our card, and we have a really beautiful portfolio. We've been lucky to kind of have these projects. I was like, oh yeah, we, you know, here, this is what we do. And then they'll email me and be like, whoa, I didn't, you know, so I don't even have to sell us. I'm just like, here's our portfolio. Here's our website that we worked hard on, you know, social media. So you can build these platforms, even if you're not comfortable selling what you do. You can build digital platforms to help get the word out. And those are really strong. So if you follow it up by just being like a decent, nice human being, you can kind of make it all work.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's an important point. I was just going to say, because I think that you still have to have good relationships with your people, right? Because I think Nicholas is saying, this is a referral business and a repeat business, right? And even if somebody loves your Instagram profile and says, I want you to design something really cool and new, more than likely they're going to ask around to the people that you've done the work for and say, is Katie really a nice person? Are they easy to work with? How did you feel about everything? Right? It's important to have that network and those people speak well of you.
Yeah, definitely.
And those connections will, like, I think, I don't know about now, but like I found, especially with furniture and photography, that those connections, they would just spin, and like before you're just top of mouth or top of, you know, you're just top of mind. Right. And I think that's a positive thing. And so the more you're top of mind with people that can make the decisions, that's a really powerful thing. And I would say on top of, you know, the portfolios, and I think social media is important, but the most important thing is that you're doing the work. You know, you have to have something to show that's real. I can't express that enough. You have to really do the work, you know, and that's I think what separates a lot of people, because there's a lot of companies that are just marketing companies that have a great social media presence, you know, and behind that, there's not really much there. So do the work.
Aaron, are you on? Do you want to ask your question? He may be having technical difficulties. I'm going to ask this. He threw a question out in the chat. How did you go about getting the business? I mean, he has some very technical questions like business registered, getting insurance. Were there any roadblocks that you had in just getting started?
No, I mean, you just do it, right? You read through all that crap on the state treasurer's website, you fill out the paperwork, you know, you do it. I think it's a little bit more complicated on the architecture side, because, you know, you are offering professional services that have, you know, you're professionally licensed. There's a lot more there. I mean, I think at that point, you're going to want a lawyer and definitely a CPA helping you get established. For me, for photography and furniture, it's just way more simple than that. I don't practice architecture anymore, at least in that way where I'm stamping drawings, but it's fairly simple. I mean, I would say if you can do it now as a student, it doesn't hurt to just even establish an LLC. You know, you're going to pay small tax every year, but it's you can start working immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also thinking about the type of business, like is it an LLC, is it an LLP, is it a sole proprietorship, is it, you know, how do you want to structure it? I mean, there's lots and lots of online resources, as I think we've been talking about, that will help guide you Although, the creative realm of things sometimes is pretty niche. And so the big thing that comes up a lot of times is indemnification and liability. And that's where, depending on the practice that you create, you want to definitely make sure that your bases are covered in terms of insurance. Errors and omissions applies to a lot of people, except in some cases, like for me, errors and omissions is not applicable. But that's where then my manufacturing partners and I have mutual agreements for holding harmless and non-liability and other things, who's responsible for what. And that's the biggest sticking point, I think, for a lot of folks as they get approached freelance. I've heard a lot of stories of, say, somebody wants me to design something that's going to be really great, but they have all these legal forms they want me to sign, and I don't really know what this all means. And to Nicholas's point, at some point, swallowing hard and getting a lawyer involved, even though it may cost you a little bit of money upfront as a retainer, will be hugely beneficial to you for a whole host of reasons.
Yeah, I would also recommend joining AIA. They have a phenomenal resource, especially more like we're 100% architecture and interior architecture. So we have a huge insurance policy and contracts, and our drawings say a lot about, what can be covered, but we really leaned on the AIA, and they have an attorney on staff that you can contact. We've had to use them a few times just for random questions that a normal attorney might not be familiar with, that are really specific to the architecture design world. And then definitely you're going to want, so setting up a business is pretty easy. You like Nicholas said, you go to the state register and registering LLC, but then when you're actually performing it, especially if you're doing any design work for a structure, for an interiors, you want to make sure you're insured, and you want to make sure you have a really good contract. And so that's where an attorney is really key in creating that contract. And professional liability insurance, there's a ton of different brokers out there. It's not cheap, but it's nice to have when we go, oh shoot, we didn't label that as tempered and laminated glass. We just labeled it as tempered glass because it got missed, and now we've got a $12,000 bill. You know what I mean? So it helps you sleep better at night.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that insurance part of it, if you're in my world, if you're making furniture, you're a photographer, you're doing something else creative, it doesn't hurt to have liability insurance. It's super cheap. I think you get $2 million of coverage for like $40 a month, right? But it's, as a student, it might be worth to have, if you're interested in like kind of getting your feet wet and like going through the motions, you should absolutely just do it. You never know what's going to happen. It's kind of like just getting your shoes on, being ready. It's kind of part of the deal. If you're going to go outside.
You guys have talked a little bit about mentorship, and I guess I would like to ask, how important has mentorship been to you in kind of being able to navigate all these waters?
Oh, I think it's been 100% critical. We've had different mentors throughout the years. There's different people we'll meet that are really excited about what we're doing, and we'll offer it, hey, if you want to go out for coffee and pick my brain sometime. We've had peers, early on, I had a good friend that went out on his own because he kind of had the experience Brian had where they're like, it's time for you to leave. And so he went out on his own, and he did really well right away. And so I think having numerous mentors for different parts, right? For business, for design, for marketing. There's some great resources, like the Chamber is usually a great resource to get started. And your professional organizations, IIDA, I can't remember, product design, AIA, they have great mentoring programs for young professionals. So you need a cheerleader is what you need. You need somebody outside you, because my parents will always cheer me on. They're going to be like, no matter what you do, Katie, you're going to be great. I'm like, okay, great, but you're not going to pay my mortgage. Right. So you need an outside cheerleader to really help. And people at K-State, past professors and faculty have been really great mentors for me.
I love the parental thing. It's like your mother, but with an attitude. Right?
I don't give it to
So
your face, right? Like
that's right.
a bad idea. And you're like, but mom, she's like, no, no, it's my mom would never tell
No,
me it's a bad idea, right? Because I wouldn't listen to her.
And I think having a
no.
lot, like you mentioned, having a lot of mentors, like because some people are really good at one thing and they may not be great at the other thing. So it's like you can, if you have, say, half a dozen people you can talk to, I think that's way better than maybe having two, right? And they could be your
Yeah.
same age, I don't think, or younger, when it comes to mentorship or being a mentee or however you want to put it. You'll find it. You have to look for sure. And you have to have
Yeah.
those people and stay in touch with
I,
them.
and I think too, as Nicholas was saying, is like different people kind of fill different roles. I mean, I have an executive coach that I can tap into, and we did sort of and I've been in business for 30 years. What do I need to, executive coach for? I absolutely needed one.
Mhm.
You just go through different cycles where you have to tap into different sources. But I'm also a big believer, and maybe you guys do this as well, that especially when you're coming out of school, people say, oh, I really want to get to here, like you have an objective. And it doesn't have to be like that's the only objective, it could be one of several paths. I'm a big believer in distant mentors. I'm a big believer in thinking, okay, if I want to have a practice like Antonio Citterio, or I want to have a practice like the Borlaug brothers, then I want to find out how did the Borlaug brothers become the Borlaug brothers, or Michael Vanderbilt, or Citterio, or Vignelli, and kind of go through the origin story, because most of them probably did the same kinds of things. They made mistakes, they got fired, they got laid off, or they tried this and they tried that, or they worked someplace else for a while and then decided to do their own thing. I think that could be helpful too, just sort of you kind of envision the path, which may not be super linear. It may be kind of like a dog hunting for a bone, right? Until you sort of find your place.
And that's like my favorite part of mentors or talking to other people in the business. It's like, how did you get here? Because it's always a crazy path, right? I mean, you can kind of project
Yeah, it's
out.
never linear.
It's never linear. And
It's never linear. It's
and you
funny.
might go one way thinking like, we're only going to do this. And then for whatever reason you change, or you might get bored with it. I mean, I think a lot of the reason we're on our own is because we get bored with stuff, right? Or we want to change things or we get new ideas. Like I have too many new ideas all the time. It's super annoying. I have to be funneled to stay focused. But that's what's really fun at like the distance mentoring, and there's podcasts that I just love their stories of like, how did you get to a certain point in your career? And some people get really lucky and they make it big, but most of us don't, like we're not, it's like acting, like one tiny percent gets to be Jennifer Aniston, but most people are just career actors and they love it and they have a great life.
Yeah, I mean, I think I met a guy at Herman Miller about 5 years ago, and we were talking, and it turns out like I was just so curious about it. I was like, how did you get here? Like all these people, you've designed all these products. And he's like, yeah, I started out designing toys. Like My Little Pony was his first, that was his thing. And then he was like the face of G.I. Joe, right? And now he's like at Herman Miller, like doing his thing. He's not there anymore, but it's like, it's just really interesting when you start to dig into people and start to understand where they're kind of at. And also listening to people's stories. Katie, like you said, I like watching video a lot. So I'm a big consumer of YouTube, and there's actually a good series on YouTube. Not going to remember what it's called. I think it's Context. I'll find a way to send it out, but they interview all these like creative, like geniuses, whether it's like Jay-Z or Johnny Ives, all these people, and they talk about their past, and it's just super cool to listen because it's not linear at all. You're like, whoa, I didn't know you're doing
Well,
that.
I think it's super important because I wrote something down before we got started that I wanted to talk about. I'm glad we're talking about this. I think, right, we're so obsessed with the end result, the image, right? The culmination of a career, somebody gets an award or something like that. It's like, hey, this is fantastic. Look at all this guy. But what did it take to get there? especially the stumbles and the mistakes and the going down the wrong paths and such, because we all have experienced it, and you're going to experience it too, and we're going to continue to experience it as we go through this life that we live. And I think it's really it's important to kind of strip away the slick picture and get into the hard truth about, you know, how people really evolve into designers. One of my dear friends, who's a fantastic furniture designer, was a landscape architect at RISD. And he just sort of evolved and tried a bunch of different things. And now he has his own furniture company. And I've worked with him, and he's worked with other people. He does a lot of his own design. It's really successful. And it is a crazy path that he took.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of going a little segue here, but I think this is really an example where the path is so much more important than the destination. At least it is for me. And that's where, you know, you talked about how do you know when you split off? How do you know when you go out on your own? I had this really defining moment with a client. We'd worked for 5 years on their project. And I went over there at like 8 o'clock at night to look at some lighting for them. We do all our lighting design and stuff. And they were just livid about the lighting, and they hate, you know, this how everything's bad in this house. And the minute I walked in, I'm like, this house is so perfect. It was exactly what we designed for. It's so beautiful. I'm here at 8 o'clock. I have an infant baby at home that I'm like ripping myself away from to come see you. And they just yelled at me the whole time. And I was like, this wasn't worth it. Like this moment of, I thought I was building this entire time. Like I've been waiting 3, 4, 5 years to get to this moment for this project to be done. And this is it. Like, no, it's got to be about the path. I've got to enjoy, you know, most of what we're doing day to day, because those end moments just are very fleeting. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't satisfying.
And the important thing you also, I think, learned, right, Katie, was next time you go through that, bring the baby with you.
Bring the baby. Bring the
I never
baby.
had a baby. It was my first baby. I didn't know.
They're not going to yell at you when you've got a baby.
I should have brought the baby. Yeah.
Bring the baby. That's a hashtag. Let's
I know
hashtag that. Bring the
one.
baby.
I know
Bring
that
the
one.
baby. That was a rookie move. You know, that was a rookie mistake. Next time,
Guys, you know, the strap, you guys strap the baby on, you know.
well, actually, Jared just reminded me that's how I got through building permits in Seattle. I would take our daughter, who was so charming, and set her on the permit counter, and she'd just charm the pants off of them. And
Well, there you go.
And we'd get the building permit. They would send me in all the time with our little girl to get building permits.
Okay, right now I can see Reed. He is totally getting this, and he's writing down right
Yeah.
now. Rent
You can borrow a baby, by the way.
Borrow a baby.
Borrow a baby. Well, that's hilarious.
I can also confirm that if you want to tour Europe, bring the baby. The Bambina is going to get you into anything you want. You know,
There's this big line at the Louvre, but my baby is tired. Oh, please go ahead, sir.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
you know, I will, unless the students have another question, I'll end us on a question that I don't know if it's related, and maybe you guys have you've kind of skirted around this here at the very end, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. It's like, what do you think? What's the role of ego in what you do?
Man. I'll go first.
Yep.
Because this comes up a lot. I will say that you have to have an ego and keep it healthy. And what that means to me is that you have to remind yourself that you can do the work and that you do bring value, and you got to consistently remind yourself of that value without kind of, you know, exuding it in a way where it's like you become the ego of this thing, because that can be very distracting, not only for you, but for your family and the people that you work with. And some people, that works for them. Some people want that person. They want to hire that person with the ego. They don't really care. They just want the name and the talent, and they'll pull it off. But for a lot of the folks that I work with, it doesn't work. And so I'd say ego plays a role. You got to keep it in check. And that means different things for different people. And it'll take your entire lifetime, maybe, I don't know, to figure it out.
I think it's confidence, maybe. Is, you know, you have to be really confident that you're doing the right thing. And maybe reminding yourself that you can do it. You know, I cannot tell you how many times I've gone into a meeting like, oh my gosh, I can't, you know, like I question everything. And I am probably the most confident person you'll ever meet, and I still get freaked out. But it's also being able to listen and understand when maybe you're wrong, or maybe when something's not going the right way. Like, instead of getting upset because, you know, I'm right all the time, it's more of like, oh shoot, how do we solve this? And how to like, so it is this huge balancing of confidence and being a good listener and being able to say like, that didn't work. Okay, I'm not going to take it personally. Let's move on.
I think for me, it's I know that I've got an ego, just like everybody does. I think, you know, in the creative field, it's a pretty common thing to have ego. But my goal is to make sure that my clients never see that. And I guess to give a little bit of an example, if I work on a project and I submit, you know, the concept renderings I did for it, and I think, oh man, I just killed it on this project. I am really proud of what I did here, man. These things are awesome. I learned a long time ago. It's great that I enjoy it, but I'm not in love with those things. So when the client pushes back and they want changes and revisions, even if I think, oh my God, this is going to ruin this thing, these changes are so dumb, but they never hear that from me. I say, okay, will do. And I just start the meter and get them done. And that's, for me, that's just part of keeping my ego in check and just understanding that ultimately the work I'm doing is not about the finished thing that I send to my client, but it's more about just that continued relationship and business that I'm building with them.
That's a really
I'd say
good
also
point.
keep in mind, this is a good ego check, is that you're not the only person involved, right? There are many people involved in that project, that thing. You know, there's a lot of people contributing to paying the bills. So it's a we thing, right? And I think just keep that in mind, because that there are a lot of people. It's not like, oh, I designed this and this is my, you know, it's kind of a we scenario.
It's a we, except if they manufacturing people think they should put your name on the product as a part of a marketing strategy, which is typically
Yeah.
what happens for me. And it's great. And yeah, for your ego, for that sort of superficial feeling of like people, oh, I mean, nobody ever tells you your work sucks at Neocon, right? They always say, we love it. It's terrific. It's great. So the balance of that is, I think, the healthy ego, sense of self-confidence, but be incredibly approachable and really low key. The best interactions I've ever had with superstar designers like Ross Lovegrove is how nice a guy he was in the Milan Fair, in front of, and everybody fawning all over him. And he was just like the nicest guy. And we had a great 5-minute conversation. And he didn't know who I was.
Fantastic. Hey, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to be part of the panel discussions. Our panelists is amazing. We're recording this, and so it'll be posted and everyone can get at it later. So thank you all, and good luck to the students. I know you're in the middle of mid-reviews or, you know, our midterms, so good luck with those, and have a good rest of your day.